The other day, somebody was asking me about the Liturgy of the Hours. And so that made me come up with the idea that maybe I should do a deep dive. And I did go a little bit down the rabbit hole, exploring some different things about the Liturgy of the Hours. Now, obviously, as a priest, the Liturgies of the Hours is something that I have to pray every day. But the question kind of came up, how would I introduce this to somebody who's not used to the Liturgy of the Hours? And so I came up with 5 things that you might want to know about the Liturgy of the Hours. So, first thing, there's a lot of different names. And this is something that might be surprising, but there's a lot of different names for the Liturgy of the Hours. Now, I think that we could look at the most correct, the most perfect name is precisely the Liturgy of the Hours. It is part of the liturgy. The priests and a lot of religious have the obligation to pray the Liturgy of the Hours every day. Now, there's kind of nicknames for the Liturgy of the Hours, and these are perhaps the names that have come up over the course of the centuries that it's existed within the church. So another name that you might hear is the breviary, and I think especially in priestly circles, this is the name that might be most common. This last week I was at a priest retreat, and at one point somebody lost his physical copy of the Liturgy of the Hours, and so when it was announced to the rest of the priests, what they said is somebody lost his breviary, and so he can come and pick it up. And then a third name that we have for the Liturgy of the Hours is the Divine Office, and this comes from the Latin officium. So it's a kind of a task, something that we have to be doing, and then divine. So it's a divine task that we have. So first thing to know about the Liturgy of the Hours is that there are several different names. Second thing to know about the Liturgy of the Hours is that an hour is not necessarily an hour. It's like how much do you have to pray? And if you want to be a little smart alecky, you could respond 5 hours, right? Because there's 5 different moments that most priests have to pray. It can get a little more complex than that. But when we're talking about an hour, it's a technical term referring to one of the kind of the moments of prayer. We have these different moments of prayer: the office of readings, we have morning prayer, midday prayer, which there's actually 3 moments of midday prayer, which monks and some religious pray all 3 of those by obligation, and is open to everybody else. Then we have evening prayer, and finally compline or night prayer. And so these 5 different moments of prayer make up the 5 hours of the Liturgy of the Hours. And the idea is that we're really extending the prayer of the church all throughout the day. But important to recognize that an hour doesn't necessarily mean 60 minutes. Third thing, the Reformed tradition of the Liturgy of the Hours. Now, sometimes there's this desire to hold on to the past and to do everything as it was done 500 years ago. But I think it's important to recognize that the Liturgy of the Hours has been reformed repeatedly throughout history. Now, what's the kind of behind this is that we're trying to pray the Psalms. There's 150 Psalms, and so these are divvied up among the different times of prayer. Previously, it was the practice to pray all 150 Psalms every week as part of the Liturgy of the Hours, and part of the reform of the Second Vatican Council was to make a 4-week Psalter. And so each week you're praying basically a quarter of the Psalms from the Bible. And so that's part of that reformed tradition that we have in the Liturgy of the Hours. Fourth thing to recognize, a lot of times if you're praying the Liturgy of the Hours, there's going to be 2 choirs. What does this mean? And you'll even see this in some churches, or even here at Duke Chapel, we can see that it's designed as well to have these choirs. So you have the monks or the sisters or whoever's praying the Liturgy of the Hours situated on 2 sides. And so you'll be answering kind of a call and response. And that's something that can be very beautiful. Now, we can do this in recitation, but it's especially beautiful when we're singing. And if you're singing in Gregorian chant, well, it's a challenge to get through the verse as far as the breathing goes. And so having that back and forth helps to make sure that we're actually able to pray the entirety of the hour. And then the 5th thing to know about the Liturgy of the Hour is how each hour has its own structure. Typically we have a beginning, so the first hour of the day, be that office of readings or morning prayer, we have the invitatory psalm oftentimes Psalm 95 with an antiphon that we repeat throughout that psalm. Then we have the hymn. So the hymn can be sung. Most properly it would be sung, but this is something that from the tradition of the church, it changes actually from one language to another, the hymn, but that's something that's important. And then we have kind of the meat of each one of the hours, which typically are going to be 3 psalms, or it might be one psalm broken up into 3 parts. And so we have the antiphon, then we have the reading of the psalm, and then we finish once with the glory be, and then once again the antiphon. And then often there's going to be one of those kind of 3 moments of psalm like prayer. One of those might be a canticle, which means that it's also poetry. All the psalms are poetry, but that it's from another book of the Bible, of the Old Testament, not necessarily from the book of Psalms. And so then after the praying of the Psalms, we're going to have the reading, and at morning prayer, at evening prayer, we'll have the intercessions before the canticle that comes from the gospel, right? And so we'll have the Magnificat, or we'll have the Benedictus, according to where we are in the day. And then we finish up with the with the prayer of the Our Father, at least at morning prayer and at evening prayer, and then the final prayer and the blessing and the dismissal. And so that's a little bit the structure of each one of the hours. So I hope this was helpful for you. The idea is just to kind of a quick little 5 points about the Liturgy of the Hours, so that you can take this or consider taking this into your own prayer. God bless.